The rot in our marriage began quietly, a creeping mold that started with his phone. I thought I was uncovering a secret affair, but what I found threatened to take our home, our future, and possibly our lives. The rot in a marriage doesn't start with a bang. It's a quiet thing, a creeping mold that starts in the dark corners you're not paying attention to. For me and Mark, the first sign was his phone. For 10 years, that little glass and metal rectangle was just a thing, something he'd leave on the kitchen counter, the arm of the sofa, even in the car overnight. It was an object. Then, about 6 months ago, it became an organ. It was attached to him, always face down, always on silent, vibrating against his leg like a secret heartbeat only he could feel. I tried to ignore it. I really did. We had a life, a beautiful, curated life. A mortgage on a house with a garden, a golden retriever named Gus who was ridiculously spoiled, and a set of couple friends we'd have over for wine and board games every other Friday. We were that couple, stable, dependable. The ones everyone else looked at and thought, goals. But that phone, it was a crack in the perfect porcelain vase of our life, and I couldn't stop staring at it, waiting for the whole thing to shatter. He started taking late-night work calls in his car. He started angling his body away from me when he was texting on the couch. His passwords, which used to be a combination of my birthday and our anniversary, were suddenly complex, unguessable strings of characters. When I casually asked what the new password was, just in case of an emergency, he laughed it off. "Just security, babe. Work's been getting really strict about it." He kissed my forehead, a gesture that used to feel like a promise, but now felt like a dismissal. The moment of truth, or at least the beginning of it, came on a Tuesday. It was painfully mundane. He was in the shower, belting out an off-key rendition of a song from the 80s, and his phone was on the nightstand, plugged in and charging. It was the first time in months it had been left unattended. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I told myself not to look. I told myself that trust was the foundation of everything, but the mold was already too deep. The foundation was crumbling. I picked it up. My hands were shaking. Just as I was about to put it back down, a coward defeated by my own conscience, the screen lit up. A notification from someone named Jessica. The message preview was cut off, but I saw enough. "Last night was..." followed by an emoji I couldn't quite make out. I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. A strange, glacial calm washed over me. The kind of calm that comes when your worst fears are not only confirmed, but are somehow more cliché and pathetic than you ever imagined. Jessica. With a fire emoji. My Mark, the man who quoted Shakespeare and spent his weekends building a birdhouse for our garden, was being seduced by a fire emoji. I could have woken him up. I could have thrown the phone against the wall and screamed until my throat was raw. But where would that get me? A messy, tear-filled denial, a fight that would end with him locking his phone down even tighter. No, the rot needed to be handled with precision, not a sledgehammer. My brain, cold and clear, started working. I couldn't unlock the phone to read the whole thread, but I could do something else. On his lock screen, if you swiped on the notification, it gave you options. One of them was View Contact. I tapped it. There she was, Jessica. A picture of a woman with impossibly white teeth and a tan that looked like it was applied with an industrial spray gun. I stared at her photo, then at the Edit button in the top right corner. My finger hovered over the screen. What could I do? I could delete her. I could change her name to something vile. But then he'd know I'd been snooping. He'd just add her back under a different name. I needed something more subtle, something that would work on him, not on the phone. And then it hit me. An idea so beautifully, wickedly perfect that a small, cruel smile touched my lips. I didn't want to scare her away. I wanted to torture him. I tapped into the name field, deleting Jessica. My fingers flew across the keyboard. New contact name, my lawyer. I saved it and put the phone back on the charger, exactly where I found it, screen dark. I got back into bed, my heart a steady, rhythmic drum now. I was no longer a victim. I was a scientist, and my husband was about to become the subject of my grand experiment. He came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, smelling of soap and betrayal. He smiled at me. "Morning, sleepyhead." I smiled back, a perfect imitation of the wife I had been just 10 minutes earlier. The first test came later that day. We were in the kitchen making dinner. I was chopping vegetables. He was scrolling through something on his phone, leaning against the counter. Then, it happened. The phone on the granite countertop buzzed, screen lighting up. He glanced down. The change was instantaneous. The color drained from his face so fast, he looked like a marble statue. His casual posture vanished, and he stood up ramrod straight. His eyes, wide with pure, undiluted panic, darted from the phone screen to my face and back again. He snatched the phone, his hand fumbling, and quickly shoved it into his pocket. "Who was that?" I asked, my voice as light and airy as I could make it, not looking up from the onions I was dicing. "Oh, no one. Just work," he stammered, his voice an octave higher than usual. "A notification about a new legal memo. You know how it is." I hummed in agreement. "Lawyers, huh? Always seem to bring bad news." He let out a short, choked laugh that sounded more like a gasp. For the rest of the evening, he was a ghost, jumpy and distracted, checking his phone in secret every few minutes with the look of a man who'd just been told he had 24 hours to live. The experiment was a resounding success. For the next 2 weeks, I lived for those moments. A text from my lawyer during movie night would make him spill popcorn all over the couch. A buzz during dinner with our friends caused him to drop his fork with a clatter that silenced the whole table. Each notification was a small, perfectly aimed dart of psychological poison, and watching him squirm was the only thing keeping my heartbreak at bay. He was living in a state of constant low-grade terror, and I was the architect of his prison. I knew it couldn't last. Eventually, he'd get curious or she'd call and he'd see her name wasn't on the screen. But I wasn't thinking that far ahead. I was just taking it one sweet, agonizing day at a time. The end came sooner than I expected. He was rushing out of the house for work one morning, flustered after getting yet another text from my lawyer that made him go pale. He grabbed his briefcase, kissed me goodbye in a rushed, distracted peck, and slammed the door. And there, on the kitchen counter, next to the half-eaten bagel, was his phone. He'd left it behind. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It felt like a bomb. It buzzed in my palm and the screen lit up. A new message from my lawyer. This time I could read the whole preview on the lock screen. It wasn't a fire emoji. It wasn't a flirty invitation. It was 4 cold, terrifying words that made the blood freeze in my veins. "The transfer is complete. Delete this. The transfer is complete. Delete this." My entire world, which had been neatly ordered into a satisfying little drama of infidelity and revenge, tilted on its axis. The cold, precise satisfaction I'd felt evaporated, replaced by a dread so profound it felt like I'd swallowed a block of ice. Transfer? What transfer? This wasn't the language of a lover. This was the language of business, of secrets, of things far more complicated than a cheap affair. My mind raced, frantically trying to recontextualize the past few weeks. Mark's panic. It wasn't the furtive guilt of a cheating husband. It was deeper, rawer. It was genuine terror. The late-night calls in the car, the guardedness, the obsession with his phone. I had seen it all through the simple, painful lens of another woman. But what if the lens was wrong? What if the picture was something else entirely? A monster I hadn't even begun to imagine. The phone was a dead end. I didn't have the password. He could walk back through that door any second, his face etched with the dawning horror of realizing he'd left it behind. I had minutes, maybe seconds. My breath hitched in my throat. Think, where else would his digital life be? His office. I flew down the hallway, my bare feet slapping against the hardwood floors. His home office, usually a sanctuary of calm and order, now felt like the heart of a conspiracy. His laptop was on the desk, closed but not shut down. A faint white light pulsed from the side. My hand trembled as I lifted the screen. It opened directly to his desktop, no password required. He must have been in such a rush. A wave of nausea and adrenaline washed over me. On the dock at the bottom of the screen was the blue icon for his messages. My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest as I clicked it. It opened instantly, a perfect mirror of his phone. And there it was, the entire conversation history with Jessica. My eyes scanned upwards, past the message I'd seen on the lock screen, devouring months of texts. The fire emoji from that first night seemed like a sick joke now. The conversation was almost entirely devoid of romance. There were no "I miss yous," no clandestine plans for a secret rendezvous. It was all logistics, account numbers, routing codes, talk of liquidation and offshore entities. It was cold, clinical, and terrifying. My gaze snagged on a series of messages from a month ago, a PDF attachment labeled Joint Account Statement. I clicked on it. It was our savings account, the one we'd painstakingly built for 10 years. The down payment for this house had come from it. The money for our future, for a family we were supposed to start trying for next year, was in it. Or it was. There was a line item dated yesterday for a wire transfer out. The amount made me feel dizzy. It was almost everything, $287,450, gone. Tears welled in my eyes, hot and useless. He had gutted us. He had taken our entire shared future and wired it away to some woman with spray-tan skin and a name that was almost certainly fake. But why? People drain accounts to run away with a lover, but their texts weren't loving. They were tense, demanding. Jessica's messages were short, imperative. Mark's were placating, desperate. "Did you get the appraisal documents?" she'd written 2 weeks ago. "I'm working on it," he'd replied. "It's not easy, Jess. This is our home." "It's the collateral. No collateral, no deal. You know the terms." Collateral. The word echoed in the silent room. I scrolled down further, my fingers flying across the trackpad, a desperate archaeologist digging for the truth in the ruins of my marriage. I saw dates, times, and then a photo. It was a picture of our house, taken from the street, a picture I didn't recognize. Underneath it, a message from Jessica. "He's getting impatient, says he drove by today, likes the garden." My blood ran cold. He? Who was he? The playful charade of changing her name to "my lawyer" suddenly felt like a child playing with a loaded gun. I hadn't been torturing a cheater. I had been poking a bear, a man entangled in something so dangerous he had liquidated our life savings to appease it. The front door of our house suddenly didn't feel so secure. The big windows overlooking the garden felt like gaping, vulnerable eyes. I heard the sound of a car engine pulling into the driveway fast. It was him. He was back. A primal urge to slam the laptop shut and pretend I knew nothing seized me. But I was paralyzed, my eyes glued to the screen. Just as I heard his keys jangling at the front door, my eyes fell on the very last exchange, right before the text about the transfer being complete. It was from 2 nights ago. Jessica. Friday. That's the final deadline. He says after that he's coming to collect in person. Mark. I know. Just tell him I have it. Tell him I have it all. Just please. Tell him to leave my wife out of this. The key turned in the lock. The front door creaked open. Mark's footsteps were heavy in the entryway. "Babe," he called out, his voice tight with anxiety. "Babe, have you seen my—" His voice trailed off as he appeared in the doorway of the office. He saw me first, sitting in his chair. Then his eyes dropped to the glowing laptop screen in front of me, open to the conversation that had just detonated our lives. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a mask of pure, absolute horror. We stared at each other across the room, the silence thick with everything that had been unsaid. But the question that screamed in my mind wasn't, "Why did you cheat on me?" It was something far more terrifying. Who was coming for us on Friday? Mark didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood in the doorway of his own office, a stranger in his own home, his face a canvas of arrested motion. The only sound was the faint hum of the laptop and my own ragged breathing. The man I married, the one who fixed leaky faucets and made pancakes on Sundays, was gone. In his place was a cornered animal. "Mark," I said, my voice a broken whisper, "who is coming here on Friday?" He finally flinched, the words breaking the spell. He lunged forward, not at me, but at the laptop, slamming the lid shut with a sharp crack of plastic. "You can't," he stammered, his eyes wild. "You can't know about this. We have to go. We have to pack a bag and go right now." "Go where?" I shot up from the chair, the icy dread in my veins igniting into white-hot rage. "Go where, Mark? With what? You emptied it. You emptied everything. 10 years of our life, gone in a single wire transfer." My voice cracked on the last word, the reality of the number I saw on that statement crashing down on me. $287,250. It wasn't just money, it was security. It was our future children's college fund. It was the safety net we had woven together, thread by painful thread. "You don't understand," he pleaded, grabbing my arms. His grip was surprisingly strong, desperate. "The money doesn't matter, it's just money. I can make more, but I can't. I can't fix what happens if we're still here on Friday." I ripped my arms away from him. "Then make me understand. I'm done with the secrets. I'm done with the phone, the late-night calls, all of it. For weeks, I thought you were having an affair. I changed her name in your phone to my lawyer as some kind of pathetic joke on myself, to watch you squirm." A hysterical laugh escaped my lips. "God, you panicked every time she texted. I thought I was torturing my cheating husband. Who was I really torturing, Mark? What have you done?" He sank into the chair I had just vacated, his head in his hands. His shoulders shook with a dry, racking sob. "It was a deal," he finally choked out, his voice muffled by his hands. "My consulting business. It wasn't doing as well as I told you. I took on a big client, a huge project, but I needed capital up front to get it off the ground, a lot of it. The banks wouldn't give me an unsecured loan." He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed and pleading for an absolution I couldn't give. "I found a private investor, a guy named Sterling. Jessica is his associate. She handles the contracts. It all seemed so professional at first, but the project fell through. The client backed out, and I was left holding the debt." "So you owed him money?" I stated, the words flat and dead. He laughed, a bitter, terrifying sound. "It wasn't like a credit card debt, honey. The interest, it compounded daily. The numbers were insane. Every week I didn't pay. The amount I owed nearly doubled. I was drowning. He knew it. That's his business model. He finds people who are drowning and he holds their heads under the water." "The house," I whispered, the word collateral from the texts flashing in my mind. Mark nodded, not meeting my eyes. "He wanted collateral for a restructured payment plan. He sent someone to take pictures. He said he liked the garden." The way he said it sent a shiver down my spine. This wasn't a banker. This was a predator. The money, the $287,000, that was everything. The final payment. I liquidated everything I could to make it. I thought if I paid it, he'd go away. We'd be broke, but we'd be safe. As if on cue, the phone he'd left on the kitchen counter began to buzz insistently. We both froze. It vibrated against the granite with a sound like a rattlesnake's warning. Slowly, as if in a trance, I walked back to the kitchen and picked it up. The screen was lit up. An incoming call from my lawyer. I looked at Mark, who was now standing, his face ashen. I pressed the green accept button, and then with a trembling finger I tapped the speaker icon. the kitchen filled with a cold, clipped female voice. "Mark," Jessica said. There were no pleasantries. "I paid it," Mark said, his voice hoarse. "You got it. Your text said the transfer was complete." "The transfer was received, yes," she confirmed. "The principal debt has been settled. Mr. Sterling considers that matter closed." A flicker of relief, so potent it was almost painful, shot through me. I saw it in Mark's shoulders, too, as they sagged slightly. Maybe it was over. Maybe we were just broke. "However," Jessica continued, her voice unchanging, "we do need to discuss the inconvenience fee." The flicker of relief died instantly. "Inconvenience fee," Mark sputtered. "What are you talking about? That wasn't part of the agreement." "The agreement changed when your payments became late," she said calmly. "The cost of collection, the administrative burden of your delinquency. Mr. Sterling feels he is owed compensation for his trouble. He's not an unreasonable man. He's not asking for more money." I held my breath. Mark and I locked eyes across the kitchen island, a shared, silent question hanging between us. If not money, then what? "The collateral," Jessica said, as if reading my mind. "As you know, the deed to your house was signed over as a guarantee. Mr. Sterling has decided to execute that clause." "No," Mark whispered. "No, you can't. I paid you." "You paid the debt," she corrected him, her voice turning sharp for the first time. "The house is the fee. Mr. Sterling will be there at noon on Friday to inspect his new property. He's quite looking forward to it. He expects you and your wife to be there." Her words hung in the air, a death sentence for the life we knew. But it was her final sentence, delivered with the chilling indifference of a hangman, that made the floor drop out from beneath me. "Oh, and Mark, tell your wife to make a fresh pot of coffee. Mr. Sterling takes it black." The line went dead. The silence that Jessica left behind was heavier, more suffocating than any sound. My hand was still holding the phone, but my arm felt disconnected from my body. Gus, our golden retriever, sensing the seismic shift in the room's atmosphere, trotted in from the living room and nudged my leg with his wet nose, whining softly. The mundane, loving gesture was so at odds with the conversation I'd just heard that it felt like it belonged to a different reality. "Mark," I finally said, my voice barely a croak, "the deed? You signed over the deed to our house?" He wouldn't look at me. He stared at the polished granite of the countertop as if it held the answers to the universe. "It was supposed to be a formality," he mumbled. "Just a guarantee. I never thought. I was going to get the money. I was sure the project would come through." "You signed away our home," I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "The place we brought Gus home to as a puppy. The garden where we were going to build a swing set. You signed it over to a loan shark, and now he wants me to make him coffee in my kitchen?" The fury that had been simmering inside me boiled over. I threw his phone onto the counter. It skittered across the surface and clattered onto the floor. How could you be so stupid? How could you be so reckless with our lives? I was screaming now, tears of rage and terror streaming down my face. Was your pride really worth this? Worth everything? He finally looked at me, and the raw despair in his eyes stopped me cold. This wasn't just a man who'd made a bad business deal. This was a man who had stared into an abyss and had seen it stare back. "He showed me pictures," Mark whispered, his voice trembling. "Pictures of you. Coming out of the grocery store, at the dog park with Gus. He knew your schedule. He knew my parents' address. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about what he would do if I didn't get it. The house. The house was the only thing I had left to give him that wasn't a person." The air left my lungs. The nameless, faceless he from the text messages suddenly had a form, a predator who had been circling us, watching us, learning us. The story I had constructed about an affair felt like a naive fairy tale. The reality was a horror story, and we were the main characters. We had 2 days. 2 days until a man named Sterling was going to walk through our front door and claim our life as his own. "We have to call the police," I said. the thought a lifeline in the churning chaos of my mind. Mark shook his head violently. No police. That's the first thing they told me. Jessica said if I ever involved the authorities, the contract would be void, but the debt would be collected by other means. They're not stupid. The contract is probably ironclad. They'll have a team of lawyers who specialize in this. We'll be tied up in court for years, and in the meantime, he knows where we are. He knows where everyone we love is. A chilling thought occurred to me. My lawyer, I said, the name I'd so cleverly invented feeling like a cruel taunt from the universe. Is Jessica a lawyer? He nodded grimly. That's how she presents herself. She drafted everything. It all looked so legitimate. Of course it did. These people weren't thugs in back alleys. They were predators in suits. They used the law as a weapon, twisting it into a cudgel to beat people into submission. We were trapped. If we stayed, we lost our home and had to play host to the man who had stolen it. If we ran, we'd be looking over our shoulders for the rest of our lives. The next 48 hours passed in a surreal blur. We didn't sleep. We barely spoke. We moved around the house like ghosts, touching the walls, the furniture, as if to memorize the feel of a life that was about to be ripped away. Every creak of the floorboards, every car that drove down the street sent a fresh jolt of adrenaline through my system. I found myself staring out the windows, half expecting to see a man watching from the shadows. Mark sat at the dining room table, surrounded by stacks of paper loan documents, contracts, bank statements, as if he could somehow find a loophole, a single misplaced comma that would set us free. He found nothing. Thursday night, the night before he was due to arrive, I couldn't take it anymore. I found Mark in the living room, staring blankly at the dark TV screen. "We can't just let him walk in here," I said, my voice low and determined. "We can't just hand him the keys and a cup of coffee. This is our home." "What else can we do?" he asked, his voice hollow. "He holds all the cards." "No," I said, an idea, desperate and dangerous, beginning to form in my mind. "He doesn't. He thinks he does. He thinks he's dealing with a terrified, broken couple who will just roll over. He doesn't know what I know." Mark looked at me, confused. "What do you know?" "I know his associate's name is Jessica," I began, ticking the points off on my fingers. "I know he uses her to handle his contracts. I know he has people take photographs of his victims to intimidate them. And I know his ego is so big that he demands his victims serve him coffee after he's taken everything from them." I knelt in front of him, forcing him to meet my gaze. "It's not much, but it's more than he thinks we have. He expects fear. He doesn't expect a fight." "What kind of fight?" Mark asked, a flicker of something not hope, but maybe curiosity in his tired eyes. "We can't fight him physically. We can't fight him legally. We fight him with information," I said. My mind was racing, connecting the dots of the past few weeks, the panic, the phone, the name, my little experiment. My lawyer prank wasn't a joke after all. It was a premonition. I had been playing a game with a cheating husband, but the rules I'd stumbled upon might just work in a much more dangerous arena. "He's coming here at noon," I said, my voice gaining strength. "He's expecting us to be broken. He's expecting us to be alone. He won't be expecting us to have a guest." I stood up and walked over to the bookshelf, my eyes scanning the titles. My father, a retired litigator, had given me a dozen books on legal strategy over the years. I pulled one out. "Mark, you need to tell me everything. Every detail you can remember about every interaction you had with Jessica and Sterling. Every word, every threat, every document." For the first time in days, a spark of his old self returned to Mark's eyes. He stood up and joined me. "What are you thinking?" I looked him straight in the eye, my heart pounding with a terrifying, exhilarating resolve. "Sterling is coming for his fee. He thinks he's going to get a house, but I'm going to make sure he gets what he really deserves." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. "Tomorrow at noon, Mr. Sterling isn't walking into a foreclosure. He's walking into a deposition, And his lawyer, Jessica? She's about to be my star witness. Friday morning dawned gray and oppressive, the sky a bruised purple that matched the mood inside our house. The air was thick with a tense, electric silence. Mark and I had spent the entire night huddled at the dining room table, a war council of two. He recounted every conversation, every email, every veiled threat, while I took frantic notes, my mind weaving a tapestry of desperation and legal theory gleaned from my father's old textbooks. The plan was audacious, fragile, and hinged entirely on the arrogance of a man we had never met. At 11 o'clock, I made a pot of coffee. The aroma, usually a comforting scent, filled the kitchen like a funeral incense. I set out a single black mug on the counter, a silent testament to Sterling's demand. Then I went to our bedroom and changed. I put on the most severe, professional-looking black suit I owned. I pulled my hair back into a tight, unforgiving bun. When I looked in the mirror, the terrified woman of the past few days was gone, replaced by a cold, hard stranger. This was the role of a lifetime, and I couldn't afford to miss a single cue. Mark had his own part to play. He was dressed in his usual clothes, but his face was pale, his hands trembling. He looked exactly as he was supposed to, a man utterly broken by fear. He was the bait. At 11:55, a sleek black car, the kind that whispers wealth and intimidation, purred to a stop at our curb. We watched from the living room window as two figures emerged. The first was Jessica, looking as polished and predatory as her online photo. The second was a man in an impeccably tailored gray suit. He was older, with silver hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He surveyed our house not with the joy of a new homeowner, but with the cold appraisal of a conqueror. This was Sterling. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands were steady. "Showtime," I whispered to Mark. He gave a single jerky nod and went to answer the door. I retreated to the dining room, where I had set the stage. Our table was cleared of everything except for two items: Mark's laptop, open and ready, and my own phone, which was propped up on a small stand, its camera lens pointing directly at the chair at the head of the table. A single bright lamp from the living room was angled down, creating an isolated pool of light, reminiscent of an interrogation room. I heard the front door open. Mark's voice was a choked mumble of greeting. I heard Sterling's, a low, smooth baritone that oozed self-satisfaction. "Smells like good coffee. Let's get this over with, shall we? I have a lunch meeting at 1. They walked into the dining room. Sterling stopped short when he saw me. He hadn't expected me to be dressed like this. He certainly hadn't expected the theatrical lighting or the phone pointed at his chair. Jessica's professional mask twitched for a fraction of a second. "And you must be the wife," Sterling said, recovering quickly. He smiled, a thin reptilian gesture. "I do hope you've packed. The movers will be here on Monday." "Please have a seat, Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice as cold and level as I could make it. "My husband and I have a few questions for you before we hand over the keys." He chuckled. "I think you have this backward. I'm not here to answer questions." "You are if you want to avoid a federal wire fraud investigation," I said, not blinking. The bluff was colossal, but it was all I had. "And you are, Jessica, if you want to keep your license to practice law in this state." Jessica's eyes narrowed. "You're making a serious mistake." "The only mistake," I countered, tapping the spacebar on Mark's laptop, "was putting everything in writing." I turned the screen toward them. On it was the entire text thread between Mark and Jessica. This thread contains months of communication which clearly outlines a pattern of predatory lending, extortion, and coercion. "For instance, this text right here," I said, pointing. "He's getting impatient. Says he drove by today. Likes the garden." A court might interpret that as a direct threat against our persons and property. Sterling's smile vanished. "That's circumstantial, a frivolous claim." "Is it?" I asked. I picked up my phone and tapped the screen. A new voice filled the room, amplified by the phone's small speaker. It was my father. "Mr. Sterling," my dad's calm, authoritative voice boomed. "My name is Arthur Vance. I'm a retired litigator, but I'm representing my daughter and son-in-law in this matter. Everything you are saying is being recorded as part of a preliminary deposition for a civil suit. We will be filing against you and your associate for fraudulent inducement and intentional infliction of emotional distress. This recording is, of course, perfectly legal in a two-party consent state, and your associate, being a lawyer, just gave her consent by continuing this conversation after I announced my presence." Jessica went white as a sheet. She knew the law. She had walked right into a trap. "Furthermore," my father's voice continued, "any attempt to enforce the contract regarding the deed to their house will be met with an immediate injunction. Pending the outcome of the criminal investigation, I will be personally requesting from the district attorney's office on Monday morning. Your business model, it seems, relies on your victims being too scared to fight back. You have miscalculated." Sterling stared at me, his cold confidence finally cracking. He had walked in expecting to collect a trophy, and instead, he'd walked into a legal minefield. He was a predator who operated in the dark, preying on fear and isolation. The moment we shone a light on him, the moment we showed we weren't alone, his power began to evaporate. "You're bluffing," Sterling snarled, but the conviction was gone from his voice. "Am I?" I replied calmly. "My prank of changing Jessica's name to my lawyer in my husband's phone was, I admit, born of a misunderstanding. But it seems fate has a wonderful sense of irony, because you see, for the last 48 hours she really has been my lawyer. Every text she sent, every threat she made on your behalf was just another piece of evidence for our case. She's been building it for us brick by brick. Thank you, Jessica. Your diligence has been remarkable." Jessica looked like she was going to be sick. She shot a panicked glance at Sterling, who was now staring at his associate with pure fury. He had been undone not by a team of high-powered attorneys, but by a desperate housewife, a broken husband, and a pre-recorded phone call. His entire empire was built on a foundation of fear, and we had refused to be afraid. Sterling stood up so abruptly, his chair scraped against the floor. He didn't say another word. He just turned, his face a thunderous mask, and walked out. Jessica, after a moment of stunned paralysis, scurried after him. We watched from the window as they got into their black car and sped away down the street, disappearing from our lives as quickly as they had entered. The silence they left this time was different. It was light. It was clean. I stopped the recording on my phone. Mark came and wrapped his arms around me, burying his face in my shoulder. His body shook with the release of months of pent-up terror. We stood there for a long time, in the middle of our dining room, holding each other up. We weren't fixed. The money was still gone. The trust between us was shattered into a million pieces. But we were standing. And we were standing in our house. The rot that had started with a secret on a phone had been exposed to the light, and now, finally, we could begin the slow, painful work of cleaning it out. I didn't know if we would make it, if our marriage could be rebuilt from the rubble. But as I looked around at the home we had fought for, I knew one thing for sure. We had survived, and for the first time in a very long time, that felt like everything.